So I do think like the expectation of people, like if you look at a lot of people who are Stoics, they keep wanting to promote this idea that, okay, like this happens, you don't emotionally, you don't react to it, you don't get angry, you just accept it. And I think like, I mean, this is not an appeal to nature, okay? But just because everything that is natural is not, doesn't mean that it's good. It's also true that nature has provided us with some tools that are beneficial, okay? So it's not a black and white thing. Like there are some people that say something is natural, therefore it's good. Obviously, that's an appeal to nature fallacy.
Arsenic.
Yeah, but it's also true. But it's also true that nature has provided us with some tools that is helpful. Okay, it's not that the appeal to nature fallacy doesn't come out of nowhere, right? And one of those tools is that the anger or sadness that you feel is nature's way of helping you learn from your mistakes, right? So numbing that out completely could slow down your progress. Sometimes it's, so you could we're not very good at identifying things that are in your control and things that are not in your control, right? A lot of like Stoics, for example, that have become really good at being Stoics, they have become too good at being Stoic. As in like things that happened to them that maybe if they got upset over it, that they did get angry over it, it would have been more likely for them to learn from it and avoid those same things happening to them in the future faster. Do you know what I mean? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Stoicism is saying, okay, we're going to have these emotions. We'll feel anger, you mentioned, we'll feel grief, and that's okay. But the question is, what are you going to do about it? They're not going to say, okay, we're going to be completely absent from anger. And I don't even think they put that as an ideal. They talk about this idea of the Stoic sage, like what would the perfect model look like? And they're saying like, well, one of those probably hasn't even been around, or if you would see them, maybe it'd be like 1 in 10,000 years, like one person in that amount of time. So there will still be that tinge of anger. There still will be that grief. Seneca, for instance, talks about embarrassment or some anxiety, and that the most polished speaker in the world might still go up to that podium and feel that little bit of stage fright. And they can work to try to reduce that, but it probably won't go away completely because it's just part of the human condition. So we're not saying be completely absent from emotions. We don't want those feelings at all, but it's rather what do we do with those feelings when they come up? That's the real question.
Susie?
This Fish Mountain is saying nature has provided us with some beneficial tools. A good example, orgasms, which actually leads me to the question, true. How did Stoics tackle sexuality?
Wait, I'm not done with my objection though. Okay, fine. Let's go to Susanna's question, and then I'm going to continue with my objection.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't recall too much of it, although there is talk about avoiding the heights of desire, that it can be very bad to compromise your character and prioritize, oh, well, I just want to be all about looks and fame and money, and I just want to have this relationship that doesn't really amount to too much. And in going along with the talks of friendships or partnerships or relationships, we're looking for these mutually beneficial arrangements where we're going to learn from someone else, that we're going to be able to share our deepest thoughts and feelings and life and whatever with another person. There's this talk of a really deep friendship within Stoicism, at least for our closer friends. I don't think it's reasonable to be that open with like 100 people. And do we really have that much time on our hands? Probably not. But for our close friends and relationships, that we should strive to be open with them and learn to mutually benefit each other. But I don't recall too much talk about sexuality in the text, although there is warning of, again, compromising your character, and talk of like the sexual experience could be very overrated in many cases.
So you're telling me that they are pro horny jail?
All right.
I'm childish. I'm sorry.
No, that's good.
Continue.
Wait. Okay. No, I don't think they did talk much about sex and Stoic philosophy.
Not too much. Marriage comes up in one of the chapters from Epictetus. He has a chapter called On the Cynic Calling, which is talking about people who, as I mentioned before, are more aesthetic, more not looking for possessions at all, and was talking about marriage. And there's this societal idea he talks about that all men should be husbands, all men should marry. And he's saying, well, maybe that's not the calling for everyone, and that we can find fulfillment outside of that. And that having children might not be the best way to go. Maybe we can benefit society at large rather than focusing on the one or two.
Yeah, I do find something that I don't like about Stoic philosophy is that it's mostly based on principles rather than consequences. It's like, these are the virtues that you have to improve just because they are virtues, and these are the principles that we abide by, like, regardless of what happens. I think focusing on consequences is where I get my morality from. So that's a problem I have with it. So going back to what I was saying, Razam is saying sometimes it's useful to be angry. Anger can fuel revolutions. Imagine a Stoic Iranian rebellion would be ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the problem with this is that, like, Stoic philosophy acts so much like you're a calculating machine, right? That you don't let anger fuel you, but you just do the right things because you have made a calculated decision based on your wisdom to do these things, to avoid harm, to make life better. But the thing is that humans don't work like that. Humans are not like this algorithm that you just submit, like, here are the best things to do, and therefore, like, for example, let's use other examples, not anger, but let's use diet and dating, right? For example, when it comes to diet, okay, like, I have to reduce my calorie intake and I will lose weight. That. Are you going to do it? No, you have to trick your mind into some punishment, some rewards, because you're not just a calculating machine. You're an emotional creature, and you need to work with, like, okay, so I'm gonna eat these low calorie, high but filling foods that is gonna make me feel full. Like, you have to figure out how your mind works emotionally, right? For example, with dating, you're like, oh, I have to, like, be confident and not simp for every girl that I see, and that showing confidence will make women, like, more attracted to me, right? You could be like, okay, this is the proper behavior, but you can't just, like, you're not gonna be able to, if you don't feel confident, you're not gonna be able to show confidence. If you're like, oh, I shouldn't be simping for everybody that I meet, well, you're still gonna do it because you're desperate. You have to be like, actually stop just because this is the right action. That doesn't mean you're gonna do it. You actually have to stop being desperate. You have to, there are techniques, like the ways you actually become more confident instead of just acting more confident, right? So just knowing the right actions is not going to make you move in the right direction. So when it comes to, like, bringing this back to the Stoic philosophy, again, learning and improving and trying to avoid your mistakes, just because you're wise enough to know, okay, I need to do this to make more money. I need to do this to avoid this problem. That knowing it is not going to be enough. Maybe anger is what the fire that you need to light under your butt to actually, you need that anger to actually get you moving, like, to actually do the things that that you should be doing. But go ahead.
Yeah, they say anger has a lot of downsides, in that it can really lead to us losing our composure, that we might take actions just out of desperation or out of revenge or out of some of these other things. And was talking about Achilles, how Achilles lost his temper and look what happened to him and all this. Like, we wouldn't want anger to be the preferred method. Okay, we might feel some anger if we see an injustice of sorts. We might want to take action by maybe appealing to government. If you think of some people like Nelson Mandela, for instance, who was just vocal about his criticisms. I think one misinterpretation of Stoicism is pacifism, that, oh, we're just going to give up and not do anything. You're not saying that, which is good.
That's not my objection. My objection.
Right. I'm saying you're not saying that, right? But we could still take charge and we could still influence change without being angry individuals. Like, what would you prefer? Like, cooler heads around a conference table talking about a strategy or a plan, or like, oh, I'm gonna be angry about this, like, like, oh, this is such a terrible thing, we need to do this thing right now, or like they're being impulsive about it, right? Like, I'm not thinking of anger as a positive thing in many respects. I often see it as a negative.
Yeah, but doesn't mean that it's always a negative. I don't think you could get many people to take, you need motivation, right? Just because you need something to get people, like, do something about it. Just because, again, I understand that Stoic philosophy does not promote, like, a lot of people think that Stoic philosophy means you're passive, right? Oh, life, things just happens in life, so don't do anything about it. No, that's not. The Stoic philosophy constantly tells you that you need to do the right things, you need to change your environment, you need to make improvements, without letting the things that happen that are bad affect you emotionally. That doesn't mean that you're not letting it affect emotionally. That doesn't mean that Stoic philosophy is telling you not to do anything about it. It still teaches you that you need to be active. You need to be an active participant in trying to make your life better. You have to be an active participant in trying to make the life of people around you better. You strive for wisdom, for justice, for all of that stuff. So it's not a pacifist philosophy. However, I do think, like, it underestimates how much action comes from emotion. Like, I do think, like, a lot of people, a lot of intellectuals discount the role of emotions as a motivation that needs to be part of the calculation, right? Just because emotions themselves don't give you the right, like, are not good in analyzing what the conclusion should be. Emotions are really, really bad at trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong. They're really bad, but they
this
are
is making
still,
I like this is making the case.
no, they are, but however, they are still very useful as a motivating factor, not as an analyzing factor. Like, if you use your emotions to figure out, like, this is wrong, this is bad, this is good, this is this is the action that we need to take. If you use your emotions for that, then you're not using your emotions correctly. But if you use your emotions, if you use your logic for coming up with the conclusions, then I think emotions still have a role into actually motivating you to do the things that you actually know that that you use your wisdom to know that they are the right thing to do.
But is this the preferred way to go about things? Like, we want anger to be like the cornerstone of, we've had many movements in the United States, for instance, like getting smoking out of most restaurants, right? Like, okay, well, here are the arguments, here's why we think it's not beneficial for health, and it's exposing other people to toxins, so maybe we should just have all the restaurants be non-smoking, and people lay out their cases and the change happens. So was there really, like, a case of, like, outrage or anger that comes with that? Like, we can sense an injustice. We could say, hey, there's something wrong with the current state of things, so let's go ahead and try to make that change. Yeah, but it wasn't like a mob that showed up at the restaurants and, like, you need to do this, and, like, they're being crazy about it. I don't know.
I mean, technically, there's emotions behind every one of these actions, because at some point you care about people not suffering, you care about people not getting cancer because of smoking. And I'm not saying make anger the cornerstone, but it does. I do think it's a useful tool in your toolkit. Again, most of us are not emotion, like, we're not robots that we could separate, like, just like take action without having any strong feelings about it. Most of the actions that we take is based on strong feelings that we have about things. Like, if you don't get angry about things, even if you think, like, okay, let's say, like, there's some injustice somewhere in the world, right? Mm-hmm. You're not going to get that many people to even, like, okay, how can we stop this injustice, right? Let's say you're wise enough, like, one of the virtues of Stoic philosophy is to be very wise. So you're wise enough to know that this is how you get rid of this injustice. And you also, one of your virtues is to promote justice, okay? But are you really going to get that many people to get up and actually try to stop this injustice if they're not angry about this injustice? it's hard to mobilize enough resources and people behind it unless you get angry at injustice.
Yeah, I think even with the modern atheism movement, or maybe something like 10 years ago anyway, where so many people were saying that, well, what's the charge here? We're going with facts and reason and logic, and that's really the banner that we need to go with. That here are the arguments from the religious. Here's why we think they're wrong. I was not such a fan of some people calling themselves like, oh, this is the reasons that atheists are angry. Like you could see the injustice, but hey, we have the facts and reason and logic on our side, right? Or look, we have these laws and these laws are being violated in some way. So let's like take them to courts and go about this. And we've had some success with that. Just this want of being equally represented, or a want of, okay, we don't want religious education in public schools. We want church and state to be separate, right? Like we don't need anger to motivate any of those calls to do that.
I'm not convinced. I think that we need some anger. We don't need anger.
Studies, I mean, that show that anger only takes you so far. It's actually empathy that will influence the tipping point in the society.
Yeah, I'm not saying just rely on anger. I'm just saying it is part of the tools in your toolkit, right? Like it is. It needs to be a factor. Okay. I mean, it's again, I don't want to do an appeal to nature fallacy, but just not ignoring the fact that this is part of the feelings that arises is like, let me actually apply Stoic philosophy to Stoic philosophy to destroy it. Okay. Here's the thing. If you experience anger, that is sometimes out of your control. So according to Stoic philosophy, you shouldn't try to control things that you can't control. So you should just let anger.
No, they say that we can be mindful about our emotions. And right. Epictetus talks about how he considered himself a very angry person. And what he did was just he went about this thing of being very deliberate about it, that once he felt like some of the warning signs, or once he started to feel a little bit angry, that he would try to back himself away from a situation, step away, reflect, and try to do better next time. And over time, he became less of an angry person. Although the anger wasn't completely eliminated, I don't know if it's the case that we can completely eliminate some emotions. Maybe, okay, there's that tinge that we might feel, but that's okay, but we're not going to have it overtake us.
I have a better advice than Stoic philosophy. I think sometimes you should just let yourself get angry. Just be aware of it. You don't even have to, like, some people are like, oh, you can't eliminate it, but you can reduce it. Sometimes I'm thinking like, you know what? Don't even try to reduce it. I think anger has a healing. There's some healing when it comes to, like, don't let it control you, but let it, like, just notice it and see it and be aware of it.
For the catharsis of it.
Yes, like for example, if something happens that makes you angry, I think what you need to do with that anger is not to let it control you, but you need to be able to leave room for it to express itself, or for you to forgive yourself. Here's the thing. I think like there's this constant struggle for Stoics to crush the anger inside them. And sometimes just like, I feel like instead of like killing the anger, just putting a leash on it and observing it, just the act of observing it and noticing that it's there, lets the anger do its job, which is a healing thing. Like it's a healing reaction. It's a healing, like something bad happens to you and you letting yourself go through some anger makes the healing process go through faster, right? But acknowledging it and observing it makes it so that this anger is not going to take control over you and come out and make you do things that you're eventually going to regret. And it's also going to help you make it go away faster, but by being so self-aware that you're noticing yourself, noticing the anger rise, noticing the anger, what effect it's having on you, it's going to, so you're going to get the healing benefit. It's going to go away faster by noticing it. And I think that you're also going to put it in a place by not letting it control, by noticing it, you're going to make sure it doesn't control you. But you don't try to eliminate it, and you also forgive yourself, because as a Stoic, I think like you go through some guilt sometimes by letting yourself be angry. But Sometimes you're like, you know what? You sometimes, as sometimes I think like, you know what? I was justified to be angry over this, and I'm not gonna take any points away from myself for being angry over this. This was a justified anger, right? So what do you think?
Yeah, guilt is an interesting thing, as we can have some of that, but we can ultimately realize that it's not overly a helpful thing, that we can't change what's happened in the past, but we could recognize it. And if we feel those feelings of guilt, well, perhaps that has some kind of restorative thing with it too, that we recognize in this moment of humility that, okay, we've made a mistake. Hey, we can do better in the future. So maybe that guilt could be replaced with something like humility, and maybe that anger could be replaced with something else as well, and not have it overtake us.
I think, well, I'm not letting it overtake me, because I'm observing it and I'm letting it do its job, right?
Right, and I think that's the good response, to be mindful, sure.
Yes, better than... I think like if you apply Stoic philosophy to your anger, right? If you apply Stoic philosophy, this is a self-contradiction in Stoic philosophy, because Stoic philosophy teaches you to just accept things, right? One thing I want to accept is I'm going to accept myself, and I'm going to accept the anger that rises when I see something that deserves anger, right? So I'm not just accepting things that happen outside of I control my anger, and sometimes that control in my anger means that some people, like a lot of people's understanding of controlling anger means like, oh, you don't let yourself get angry. No, sometimes my control of my anger is that I dial it up intentionally. Like it's like being in control of your anger. That doesn't mean you don't get angry. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? I am in control of my anger, and I decide intentionally to dial it up right now because this is the proper response. And I accept myself, and I notice this anger rising, and I accept it. This is something that is happening, just like a hurricane that happens to you, and you accept it, part of Stoic philosophy. This internal anger that is rising from within me, I look at it like a hurricane that happens in nature. This is also something that happens in nature, and I also accept this. What do you think?
Oh,
I'm having a flashback to so many conversations. No, I'm angry, and this is justified. And I'm
all the like, SJWs in the streets, right?
I'm like, I'm in a hurricane right now.
Yeah. So
right. These days, just to be clear, these days, anti SJWs are give me more reasons to be angry than SJWs. But
yeah. So the idea of accepting things, the Stoics talk about, we can have a lot of desires, and we can have some automatic thoughts like desire for wealth or lust over someone, and like we can get so stuck on this and have this being a priority. So should we just accept this, like, oh, I want to eat like 5,000 calories a day and forget about exercise, like I just feel like I want to lay down and stuff? Like the Stoics will say sometimes the feelings that we have aren't productive things, and we should try to reduce those in some ways. And okay, occasionally maybe we'll have that cheat day or that piece of cheesecake or whatever, maybe that's not a horrible thing. So maybe anger in some sense can be like that too, as you're saying that, okay, well, if we can moderate it, if it can have some kind of good outcome to it in a little way and not have it overtake us, then I suppose that could be a thing. As I think the classics though would say like, no, just do away with it altogether. It doesn't have that beneficial thing. It has more downsides than positives, I think is what they would say.
Robert is saying, is Armin conflating passion with anger, knowing you're logically and reasonably correct, and by a self-prompt action against injustice? No.
Hi, Robert.
Hi, Robert. No, I don't. I'm not conflating them. I'm talking about anger, not just any kind of passion. Anger itself. Anger itself is like this is a thing that we are born with. This is like hardwired in our brains. It's a way to react to some negative effects. It's negative events that there's agency behind it. Okay, so negative events that doesn't have agency behind it leads to sadness and misery. Negative events that there's agency behind it, naturally your reaction to it is anger. Okay, so, and I think that anger could even be this sounds contradictory, that anger sometimes is even enjoyable, right? Because it's healing. You feel the healing. You feel this thing that happened to you, and there's agency behind it, and you want to direct some anger towards the agent behind that negative event. That is, if you don't use that anger as a calculating tool to figure out what should be done, and only use it as a way for you to emotionally respond to something that emotionally does affect you, it could have healing properties, and it could also motivate you, because like, we're not wired in a way to be like, okay, I'm getting so much satisfaction from knowing I am logically consistent right now here in reacting to this. That is the motivating factor. It's just not as strong. Okay. So I think once you go through a logic filter to make sure that you are in the right, after that, the thing that moves you could be anger. I'm not saying it should always be anger. Sometimes it's like, I don't know, passion for something else. Sometimes it's like sadness. Sometimes it's like lust.
Empathy.
Sometimes it's empathy. But sometimes it's anger. And there's multiple benefiting in tapping, multiple benefits, like healing and also motivation to tapping into your anger. I mentioned lust. One thing that I noticed, like the similarities between what Stoic philosophy teaches you and Islam, here, in my opinion, is that this idea of making lust a taboo desire, right? This is, again, trying to, also like in Buddhism, trying to get rid of ego, right? Trying to deny lust, trying to deny ego, pride, trying to deny anger. You can't,
I don't think they're trying to deny it, but rather reduce this and just question about whether it's.
Yeah, but sometimes you don't want to reduce it. Like I just think, like, I don't want to appeal to nature. I just want to say that you can't. Sometimes it's hard to stand against your nature. Just going, like, acting like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna ignore my lust, or you know what? I'm gonna ignore ego. As in, like, it's, to me, it sounds like you're just like a train is coming at you, and you just stand in front of the train and hold your hand like this to stop it. Like, I don't appeal to nature, but don't deny nature. Nature is a powerful force. Anger is a natural reaction that you have to. And when I say it's a natural reaction, I'm not saying everything.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's good or bad, right?
But it is a force of nature. It is powerful. Okay. That doesn't make it inherently good, but because it's wired in your brain, it is sometimes, like, resisting that will have more damage, internally more damaging than just letting it do its thing. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, the lust question is an interesting one too. And one thing within Stoicism is they say that don't just be completely reliant on the ancient teachers, that we should update our thoughts as we learn more about the world. As I know there are modern movements that are just completely against pornography, particularly like Christian movements that are just saying it's going to completely overtake you and you're going to get into this porn addiction. And there's some men's groups also that talk about what they call nofap, of not watching porn at all.
The P word, can we, like, reduce the number of times? Like, I think okay. YouTube doesn't like that if we keep using it.
So some adult videos, some people are against the adult videos, and
there's also the sex worker exclusionary radical feminists.
Yeah. So in some cases with the adult videos, okay, well, at some point, a person, if they can control themselves about it and not just be like lying in bed watching videos for hours and hours, not accomplishing anything. Like that, obviously nobody wants that, but if they can do it with moderation and be okay, which I think is the main thing that Stoicism calls for, it's like, well, if you go to a party and you drink some wine, that's okay, but as long as you don't just get completely drunk and embarrass yourself and, ruin the whole event for everyone. So moderation, I think, is a very important thing. Yeah, so maybe that could be something with anger as well, to try to get some kind of middle to things, as long as it's not overtaking us. As long as we can recognize it when it's happening and not make rash decisions, then maybe it's not as bad.
And also subscribe to our newsletter, because if we get removed from all these platforms, at least we could reach out to you. And guys, by the way, if you subscribe to our newsletter, you get a free copy. Where's your copy, Susanna? Get it. We're doing promotion. You get a free. It's not even promotion. It's free. Okay, so if you subscribe to our newsletter, link in the description, you get a free copy of Why There's No God. Come on, like I'm handing it out for free. Okay, it's a bestseller on Amazon, and you get it for free. So subscribe to our newsletter, and you get a free copy of Why There's No God sent to you. Link in the description.